Good evening, everybody, and yes, it's a party. We're in Long Beach. What else can you do in Long Beach but party? The music has started, and we are here. You are watching Bakersfield.com as we kick off at 6 o'clock, but right now you're listening as well to News Talk 1180 and the new 96.1 FM KERN. I'm Vance Palm, as always, joined in pregame by Jeff Evans, Bakersfield College Renegade Football. What another stellar Southern California evening. Last week we were in the throes of gorgeous Costa Mesa. Now we are looking at the panoramic vista of the mountains behind Long Beach, California. Good evening, Jeff. Good to have you with us. Jeff, as we always do here in our pregame, we go back 7 nights. It pains me sometimes to go back 7 nights on certain evenings because 7 nights ago was not a very good night for the Renegades. We played Golden West, and a tough night all the way through, Jeff.
Well, you know, I've been seeing Renegade football now since the mid-'80s. Now, some of our listeners may go back many more years before that. But honestly, I thought it was one of the worst, it wouldn't be an effort because they were trying. But I'm talking about execution-wise, maybe one of the poorest games, if not the poorest game I think I've ever seen a Bakersfield College team have was last week. And it wasn't because the week before they played a Riverside team that was as good as anybody in the state. But, you know, Golden West last week, you know what they were? They were Renegade-like. They were smaller, they were quicker, they were fired up, and they basically punched Bakersfield in the mouth from the first play on, and that's why they had 180 yards in penalties because they were a lot more aggressive. Bakersfield had 25 yards in penalties. The first one, not until they had a false start with 9 minutes to go in the game. And I thought later, if that isn't an illustration of how lack of aggressiveness maybe on Bakersfield's part last week, and you always talk about no penalties, but the bottom line is the Golden West took it to Bakersfield last week, and it was it was embarrassing to watch that effort.
We're going to hear from Coach Judy next segment with Kirk's weekly interview with him, and we'll get to that in just a second about what he had to say to you. But for those of you that are here and those who are watching, I think what we expected to start off the evening with good. We can get Riverside behind us, get that out of the way. We had a lot of turnovers. Let's get this first off. Oh, fumble on our first possession. And so that starts to really play into the psyche of these young guys when you're trying to put a turnover-laden game week one behind you, and the very first handoff, we fumble again.
And, the bad thing is it puts you in your defense in such a bind. I mean, all of a sudden you're defending the goal and you're only 19 yards away from the goal. The other team has a lot shorter field. And this has really been the first 2 weeks of the season. This is what we've seen. And I tell you what, the biggest stat that jumps out at me is 6. We're talking about turnovers. Bakersfield College has had 6 more turnovers than their opponents through the first 2 weeks. And you do that, you're not going to win very many games.
And our turnovers are deep in our own territory, like you mentioned, so it's a very difficult task. So now, in closing the door on the last 2 weeks, what I do want to say is that, now we're 0-2 going into a very, very tough opponent tonight in Long Beach City College. They're 2-0. Let's jump into the knowledge about our opponent this evening.
Well, it's funny. Their offensive numbers aren't anything special. They've got a running back that's very highly touted. He's averaging 50 yards a game. He's got exactly 100 yards. Their quarterback's thrown for 430 in 2 games. That's about 220 yards. See, those numbers aren't jumping off the page at you. They have a receiver with 10 receptions as their leader. That doesn't jump out of the page at you. But what their defense is really what's going on. They've really shut people down defensively. And in a way, that's a real danger for Bakersfield because Bakersfield has really struggled to move the ball this year. And they're running into a Long Beach team that defense has been their strength. So, really Bakersfield needs to put some get some first downs and really kind of establish themselves offensively. And this is the final warm-up. Next week is league opener against Allen Hancock at Bakersfield. And, really this is the games you really got to use to prepare yourself for the next, the round, which really is really what it counts. And that's the league. You win your league, no matter how you do against your non-league games, you win that league, you're in the playoffs.
That's the voice of Jeff Evans. I'm Vance Palm. Welcome, everybody. This is News Talk 1180 and the new 96.1 FM KERN as well as Bakersfield.com. We're here again, week 3, on the road at Long Beach City. A beautiful evening. Jeff, you look at this campus, you look at this school. Kirk and I had a pregame of all pregame meals here. This is a big-time community college atmosphere, I think.
Yeah, it is. And it's, it's funny. The stadium is, all the seating is on one side, which you mentioned earlier seeing the mountains in the distance, and what's really kind of notable is you can see the mountains. Usually the smog is so bad you can't, and everything is, it's a very pretty campus, and of course it's been around forever. So it is, there's a lot of people in this town. It's 400-some thousand people here. but it's clean, and I tell you what, it's a beautiful setting right now, and there's a little breeze, and it's about 80 degrees. It was about 95 when we got here. Now it's cooling off a little bit, so it's really an ideal night.
I come up here and all these windows are closed. I mean, you would think that the genius minds, all of the technical genius minds that set this whole thing up would have realized, hey, there's 17 windows behind us. Why don't we open these things up? I'm not going to mention any names, though. All right, we're still in our pregame show. I want to ask you a very important question. Is it possible that you have a foreboding statistic that only the finest of Bakersfield College football fans would know?
Well, this one actually got out there last night a little bit, thanks to Louis Amistoy. But the bottom line is Bakersfield College is 0-2 right now. The last time they started 0-3 was 1940 when they started out 0-4 with 4 shutout losses to start the year. We're talking before World War II for the United States. We're talking less than 100 years since the end of the Civil War in 1940. So
we're talking 75 years ago.
Yeah, so 75 years ago. So, it's, they've never been 0-3. And again, a lot of that has to do with, you always seem like you always have some easy opponents in the early season games. But now the way this leagues and the Southern Cal Football Association works it, you really have a meat grinder kind of schedule. You're playing the top teams. If you're considered a top team, and Bakersfield is considered a top team, you're going to play top teams from other leagues. And so it is much more, it's easier to have an 0-3 when you're running into the people like Riverside and Long Beach than it is when back in the old days when they might play, Fresno City College or COS or maybe, some weaker team. Santa Ana, one year they beat Santa Ana pretty handily down here. So, now it's a little tougher because they are playing tougher people.
Jeff Evans from the Bakersfield, California. This is our pregame show. Jeff, let's talk a little about our Renegades. 2 of our key players that we really kind of focused in on to start the season with was going to be our running back, Curtis McGregor, and, of course, our sophomore, and in this institution, that's a veteran, our sophomore quarterback, Tarek Yagi. Both numbers-wise right now, not experiencing out-of-the-gate success.
Well, right now Curtis McGregor has 95 rushing yards through 2 games, and Isaiah Sharp, who is considered a very good running back, has 30 yards in 2 games. We're talking averaging 15 yards a game. Tarek Yagi's averaging barely 130 yards passing a game. Now, a lot of that has been not finding holes. A lot of the offensive line has really been shoved around,
right.
and that's really a lot of you're like some people are saying, well, gee, Dominic Frash or the outstanding cornerback, maybe they should move him to wide receiver to give him some speed on the outside. Well, I tell you what, if you don't give your quarterback any time to throw, you can have
Jerry Rice.
Well, it doesn't matter. Jerry Rice or Bolt of Jamaica could be their wide receiver, and you're not going to be able to get the ball to him because you're going to get swarmed under before. And that's really been the issue, that they really haven't had a lot of time to throw. But also, when Tarek's had time to throw, he's also missed a lot of receivers. So that's another issue. And and as far as the running game, a lot of times you're getting hit about the time you get to the line of scrimmage. You're not going to get very many positive yards.
That is the voice of Jeff Evans. My name is Vance Palm. You're watching Bakersfield.com and listening to News Talk 1180 and the new 96.1 FM KERN, Bakersfield College Renegade Football. We're down at Long Beach. We're about to take on the Vikings. We'll be back with the second segment of our pregame show. We're going to hear from head coach Jeff Chudy right after this.
One thing about living in Kern County is all these great rivalries. One thing about living in Kern County is all these